Good evening. Welcome to this edition of the 411 Talk Zone radio show. My name is Leon Jones. Today's topic, we are going to talk about the moral decline of America and who caused it. This video is the moral decline of America. So let's get into it. Well, as you look at it now, we live in a topsy-turvy type of society today. It's gone more secular. Now, let's go all the way back to the 1900s when we were in the Industrial Revolution. That's when we were basically transforming everything from manual to machines. This is where you saw the likes of Henry Ford, the Dodge brothers. They had the assembly lines to get all of the cars produced in a mass production form. So we get vehicles out. Now, during that time, you had people making money. Also, Jim Crow was in effect. And as black people, we were supposed to be free, but we really weren't free. We were just living under the tyranny of the Jim Crow laws. That's real white supremacy. Now, between 1900 and 1920, this is when we had World War I. This is also the income tax. That was started to pay for the war. And that was during the Woodrow Wilson era. Now follow me on this. If you look at what transpired before the income tax, we had wars. We had the Spanish-American War. We had the Civil War. And we paid for it. Also, we had no government programs. So moving on between 1920 and 1929, this is when you had the prohibition of alcohol and you had the stock market. Okay, now I call this first generation from 1900 to around 1935. I call it the World War I generation. Okay, basically, we had families, we had morals, and even black families. We were together. We had problems with Jim Crow laws. That's true. I mean, racism was running abundance, particularly between the 1920s and 1930s with the Ku Klux Klan at its finest during that time, and they were at their high point. Now, during the end of the 20s, we had the stock market crash in 1929. And about 1933, over in Germany, this is when we had the beginning of World War II. Now, this is a significant time because we had the World War II generation and ones who were actually fighting in the war to actually save this country from being taken over by Japan, because December 7th, 1941, this is when we got into the First World War. It's the Second World War, excuse me. We actually got in the First World War with Germany as well. But we got in the Second World War with Japanese because they bombed Pearl Harbor. Now, where I'm going with all these events that happened in history, because during that time, from the late 20s, this is when you had Roosevelt and as president, and this is when you found that the programs like Social Security and welfare, they were all started during that time. And this is when you had the World War II generation, and they were fighting. But we still had morals. And during the World War II time, we had a big increase of suburbanites, even African Americans. We had families. In fact, let me give you something. When my father was coming up, and his father, to go to a sporting event, people were dressed in suit and ties. Prosperous families. Black Wall Street. Everybody in America was making. And during real white supremacy, even African Americans shared some economic development until it was destroyed. But why did America decline. Because in the 50s, we had to Leave It to Beaver, which is a family. The mother was home working. Father was respected. Women were more respected, better dressed. It was happy times for most people. Now, also during the World War II generation, this is when you had a lot of babies that were born. And that was between 1945 and 1964. And that's going to move to my next point. See, the World War II generation and back, they were all traditional. Families, church. It was about economics, pro-America with the flag. Then you come to this generation, and I call it the degenerate generation, because prior generations had done all the work. I mean, you had the Industrial Revolution, you had 2 world wars, of course, there was slavery, but you had Black Wall Street, and prior generations did everything without the benefit of government. But what happened when the baby boomers were born? This is when everything changed. In fact, a lot of the baby boomers went to college. This is why they became left-wing fanatics. This is when feminism started. It wasn't just off the civil rights movement, because the civil rights movement was valid. Feminism and all these other Woodstock, pot-smoking, sex, drug, rock and roll individuals were baby boomers. They went to college to avoid the draft of the Vietnam War. And you had a lot of protests. But if you look at the people of the baby boomer generation who were in the 60s with all of this peace and love and happiness, they didn't do anything. In fact, if you look at it now, the programs that were created, who uses them more? The baby boomers. When the baby boomers took over everything, this is what happened. Prayer went out of school. The Great Society came into effect. And this is when African Americans, they got on a welfare system. Because welfare was set up for folks during the stock market crash in 1929. And was mostly white folk who were on welfare. And today, raw numbers, it's more white folk on welfare. Don't get it twisted. But per capita, since most African Americans live in the urban areas and the media runs in the urban area, it's all a facade that we're the ones who take up most of the welfare bill. It's not true. Because most of your baby boomers were white. They were professors. And they lost all the morals. Because it was the baby boomer generation that wanted all this, again, liberation. This is where you had the majority of single mothers, which the government, they were also part of it. Cloward and Pivens, who were instructors from, I believe, Harvard, what they wanted to do, they wanted to take the system and collapse it and start a new system. And with that happened, if that had happened, we would become a third world country. But if you look at that time between the 60s and now, you could see that there has been an erosion of morals and values. And this is where I wanted to go with this video. Now, how are we going to change it? There's only going to be one way we're going to change it. Because moving on after the baby boomers, my generation came. And during the baby boomer generation as well, that's when you had a rise in divorce. All these policies. In fact, alimony, child support. You had more programs during the baby boomer generation. Because the baby boomers, for the most part, and I'm not saying all of them, but a number of them weren't very productive people. They were parasitic. This is why their policies are extremely left. Now, big baby boomers are like Clinton. And if we had voted Hillary Clinton in, it would have been more the same. She may act like she cares about you. She cares about herself. Big lobbyists, big donors, and that's what the Clintons were about. They were baby boomers. But the significance of it is everything came down to my generation, Generation X. Generation X is the generation from 1965 to 1984. But it's my generation that propelled a lot of the new technology, followed by Generation Y, which Generation Y was from 1984 to 1999, and then you had the millennials. Well, if you look at my generation, Generation Y and the millennials, the decline of respect has gone down through all the generations. The lack of responsibility. You have more kids living at home today than they ever did. In fact, you have particularly more parents trying to be friends with their kids. It's like their kids are running the show. They're talking back to their parents. They don't care about what the parents said. And there's no discipline. You see, during the past generations, what we considered child abuse today wasn't child abuse then. We could spank our children. We can't do that now. In fact, from the World War I and World War II generations, it was not okay to have children out of wedlock. Now, why am I saying all this? Because if you look at the state of the country today, the 1960s screwed everything up. Certainly, for African Americans, we had the civil rights movement. And that wasn't very effective because, you think about it, yet we have integrated, but we're still at the bottom economically. But then a lot of the other races are also doing what they need to do. But here's the difference. They come over here with their own money. And we're talking about the Indians and the Chinese, and they set up their own businesses. Plus, there's incentives for them to start their own business as well, where we don't have that. So if you look at the morals, they've really shifted in our community, and we've become very disrespectful to each other. And that's because of the feminist movement. And I know Tommy Sotomayor, he puts out videos on the BT 1000 and Ed 209. But how did we get there? Again, the baby boomers who believed in single motherhood, welfare of the 1960s to now. It all started. That's the catalyst. If you really look at the decline of society, thank the baby boomers. And if you look now and going forward, guess what? The value of the dollar is less. With all these programs, we're going to be taking care of the baby boomers. And this is why we have trillions of dollars in debt because of left-wing policies. See, a number of individuals don't understand politics at all in government. When you have a society that believes government should run everything, you have a decline in industry. You have jobs going away. And this is what happened when you had President Clinton. He's a baby boomer. Now, am I saying all baby boomers ruined everything? No, but enough of them did. And these were ones who got themselves in power through academia, through politics, through media, through feminism, communism, socialism. But now let me put the brakes on. How do we stop it? Here's how we do it. Generations like mine, Generation X. In my generation, we happen to be ones who have had, I didn't say most of the entrepreneurship jobs, but we had enough of them. We have to teach the younger generation principles and morals, and we cannot be like a Xerox copy machine to duplicate what the baby boomer generation has done. The baby boomer generation, and that's Democrats and Republicans, they really put it to everybody when it came to the economics. They talk about the wealthiest 1%. They are the wealthiest 1%. Because with the baby boomers in power, the middle class people like myself, we suffer. That's why the value of the dollar is low. I mean, if you look at the baby boomers in charge, look what we've had. We had gas lines in the 70s. We had unemployment in 1983. And I graduated from high school in 1983. It was hard to get a job. We had the recession of 2008 when you had individuals who didn't have enough money to buy a house, but they were getting financed for houses that they couldn't pay for. This is all the baby boomers. And then you had Obama. He's also a baby boomer. He's a late baby boomer. But still, he believed the radicalism of the left, that the government needs to run everything to create an equal society or a great society of Lyndon B. Johnson. It never worked. And you can see where we are now. And it'll never work with left-wing policies. Now, did Donald Trump appoint some racists in his cabinet? I don't know. We shall see. But he is outlining his policies for his first 100 days. And one of the things we have to do, if you really want to straighten everything out and have a better economy, got to get government out of everything. See, the baby boomers, they utilized all these government programs for themselves. And when more of them retired, we're going to be paying for a lot of them, particularly if they worked in the government. See, they took all the money, the baby boomers, and they've left us to pay for everything. This is why I say, yes, you help every generation out, but baby boomers haven't done anything for anybody else. In my generation, at least we have picked up the pace. Generation Y has picked up the pace. But when it comes to morals and values and family, it's gone because of the baby boomers. And you have a lot of children of the baby boomers and even of my generation who believe that left-wing jargon, the wealthiest 1%, when they are the wealthiest 1%. And if you look at it in business, it's not as professional as it used to be either. In fact, the baby boomer generation was a very selfish generation. Me first. I don't care about structure. And that's what happened. That's basically how everything is now. It is an entitlement, me first generation. Nobody knows how to connect. And it's even bad now when technology is doing the work for us. We lost the values of chivalry, thank you, handshakes. It's a you owe me type of world now. We have TV that doesn't have anything educational in it anymore. All this that I'm mentioning is from the baby boomer generation. And again, I'm not blaming all the baby boomers, but who were the ones who were in college in the 60s. If you look at that decade, some of the music that came out talked about rock and roll, sex, drugs. Look at a lot of the singers, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. They died because of drug overdoses. And this is what was going on during the Vietnam era. And this is where the hippie generation. This is when they lost grooming standards. This is where you saw the long, dirty hair and the long beards. And this is what you're seeing now with some of these. I call the anti-Trump support march. Of course, George Soros financed it, but it's another Occupy Wall Street, and that's the same thing. Kids showing no respect, tearing up people's property. It's the same thing you had in the 1960s. The same thing. And it's not going anywhere. But I will tell you, when everybody to try to understand that respect is earned, but give respect to people who are mentoring you. Try to respect your elders. I still respect my elders, even if I don't agree with them. But at the end of the day, a country cannot rise no higher than our women. That's right, women set the trend. And women can change a lot of images. But are they willing to do it? Time will tell. And that's this edition of the 401 Talk Zone radio show for today. Tuesday, November 22nd, 2016. My name is Leon Jones. Please subscribe to the channel if you like this content that I'm producing so I can give you more quality education. Also, we like to be positive on this channel, so please be respectful. And if you have a business or a topic that you would like for me to discuss on Blog Talk Radio or YouTube, please email me at lej6521@gmail.com. Also, feel free to leave a comment. Make sure that your comments are pithy, no bloviating or pettifog. And once again, my name is Leon Jones. Please be respectful and gentle to each other, and have a wonderful and blessed evening.